All right, if you are wanting to make next year the year where you truly feel like such a successful person, and that is taking into consideration whatever success looks like for you. So, whether you define success in terms of like work things and your career or your business, or whether you define success in terms of how much time you get to spend with your kids, that is your own personal choice, right? Success and the concept of success is subjective, but no matter what, there are, I would say, like some quote unquote codes. If you don't know what codes are, it's kind of just like a woo woo word for like the codes to success, right? So, like the codes, it's like you type in this code in the computer and then this happens. You think about like a hard drive in a computer, it's made up of all of these codes to then do certain things. So, when we are wanting to, it's basically another word for like secrets, right? Like it's these codes that you get. And once you like have these codes anchored into your body, it's just the way that you live without thinking, essentially, right? So there are codes to manifestation. There are codes to becoming her. There are codes to like anything that you want. I was thinking about the other day, what actually is something that all successful people have in common? Like, what are those traits? Right. And this was also spurred based on this conversation I was having with my healer the other weekend. And I was thinking about even just everything that I have been through and like how far my life has come and like all the hard moments and like what then got me to the other side, what has continued to allow me to feel successful towards myself, but also for other people to perceive me as somebody that is quite successful. And remember, like success is subjective. So some of the things that we're talking about today, it could be perceived that this is really only relevant when it comes to like career success. But I want you to open your mind and think, how could this relate to even success in my home or in my health or in my mindset or in my healing journey? Okay. So the first one, which I think we all need to just kind of like really anchor into these days, is extreme ownership. So many people these days are just playing the victim. They don't do their research. They don't fucking critically think. They aren't just like taking ownership of themselves, their own life, their thinking. They're playing the victim. It's this like, poor me, everything is so hard, blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing. Many of us have been through really fucking hard things. Some of us have been through way harder things than other. Some of us perceive that we've been through harder things than other people, so we should get more validation and they don't matter as much. And if you have that complex, not a healthy complex to get into. I'm not even going to go down that fucking path right now, but that is not a healthy complex to get into if you think that you deserve more attention because of what you've been through, because that is all subjective. It is all subjective. All right. It's like when people assume things based on me, based on like an Instagram post. I'm like, you actually don't, like, you aren't my best friend. Like, you don't know my full story. You know what I mean? So extreme ownership. I say this one to begin with because somebody that takes extreme ownership not only then takes ownership of where they're moving towards, they also take ownership of how they maybe have let themselves down, where they've tripped up, where they self-sabotage, where they can show up even more fully. If you don't take ownership of yourself, you can't help yourself. And if you think that the only way to have the life of your dreams is to, and just to be like the best version of yourself is for somebody else to help you, like that is problem number one. Because now you are outsourcing your power. You are playing the victim. You are literally diminishing your own power and confidence and ability to self-heal and to show up for yourself and to get what you want. So, like, whilst I do care what's happened in your past, for the sake of what I'm about to say, I don't care what's happened in your past. I don't care if you're having a shit day. How can you show up for yourself, even if it's in the smallest of ways? How can you completely disconnect from this like victim savior complex? How can you step out of the wounded feminine or wounded masculine? Because no one, really feels that good about themselves when they're just constantly outsourcing their power or playing the victim. And if you do feel better about yourself by playing the victim, you feel better about yourself because it's basically taking the what's the word? The ownership off yourself. So it's like, oh, great. I can just blame everybody else for my problems because it's not actually me. It's them. The reason why I don't have the life that I want is actually because of them, not myself. Incorrect. Brr, incorrect. Like buzzer, incorrect. The reason why you don't have what you want is not because of anybody else. It's because of yourself. Other people might have made it harder. 100%. But how you engage with those people, how you think about those people, what you do with those people, whether you disconnect from them or stay connected to them, how you communicate with them, how you do or do not draw boundaries with them, that is what determines your level of success. Your success is based on you and you only. The only person responsible for getting what they want in their life is you. That is it. Obviously hard when you're under the age of 18, but we're all over the age of 18 here. So once you are an adult, the only person responsible for you is you. And if you are continuously blaming other people, you are not helping yourself. So don't expect to get what you want. Don't expect to feel good about yourself. Don't expect to feel high vibe. Don't expect to feel confident and peaceful and stable in your body, mind, and soul. You will never feel that way if you are blaming other people or outsourcing your sense of safety or your sense of power or your sense of emotional regulation. Successful people, they take extreme ownership for their actions, for their decisions in life. Even that can include the things that they wish they didn't fucking do. They take ownership of it rather than blaming. They have self-compassion even in that ownership, okay? They take ownership of their outcomes. They take ownership of everything instead of blaming external people or circumstances. Because when you have this mindset of things are harder for me because of blah, guess what? Things become harder for you because of blah. And the reason why this happens, like victimhood is self-harm. Victimhood is self-harm. And I say victimhood is self-harm because you are harming yourself in the sense that you are telling yourself that you cannot get what somebody else can get because of whatever it is that you're telling yourself. So what happens with victimhood is we tell ourselves, for example, because I'm this age, or because I've had this thing happen in my life, or because I grew up here, or because of the way that I look, whatever it is, because of that, I can't get what somebody else can. What you're then doing is you are telling your reticular activating system, filter in all of the information that proves that to me and filter out everything that proves otherwise, right? And so then what happens is you start to pretty much only see a reality that proves that to you, only sees a reality that proves that to you. And you start not seeing a reality that doesn't prove that to you. That's how our reticular activating system works. Really quick metaphor, like a really quick example that like it's a metaphor, whatever, that most people know. You've never seen this car before. You go buy this car and now everyone's driving the car. Everyone was already driving the car. It's just that you didn't see it because it wasn't deemed as important to your reticular activating system. It doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. If you have deemed it as important, AKA, I can't get this because of XYZ, that is what you are going to see. That is how our brain works. It has to work like that because we see so much every day. So we have to naturally filter in what we deem as important and filter out what we deem as not as important, right? But you're deeming it as important or not. So there was actually this study done that I'm going to summarize for you guys. I heard about it in a podcast, so I looked it up so I could then tell you guys about it. And it literally proves this idea that if you believe something is wrong with yourself, you will then have a different experience, even if that person is not seeing what you're seeing. So there was this SCAR experiment by Robert Kleck, Dartmouth University. It was done. The participants, 27 male, 21 female, they were told that the experiment was meant to observe if people behave differently towards those with scars on their face. So the participants were placed into rooms with no mirrors, and the makeup artist, they drew like these scars on their face. After the scar was drawn, they were given a short glimpse of like what they looked like with a mirror of like, okay, they now have this like massive scar on their face, blah, blah, blah. And the participants were then invited to leave the room and interact with the other people in the building, or it was an interview or something like that. And before they left the room, the makeup artist just told the participants that they needed to just like do some final touch-ups of the scar. But what the makeup artist actually did was they wiped the makeup off. They took the scar away from their face. So the participants left the room thinking they still had this scar on their face, right? So they left the room thinking that they had this, ugly thing on their face, essentially. They then overwhelmingly reported back so they went out and mingled, right? They overwhelmingly reported back that people stared at their scars, they interacted with them differently, and they were mean and rude to them. But as we all know, they didn't even have the scar on their face. So what this is telling you is like what you then believe about yourself. That is what you then hear. It is what you see. It is what you get. The people weren't, though, necessarily mean to them or rude to them. They would have behaved the same had they had the scar or I mean, we actually don't know how they would have behaved if they had the scar, because they didn't have the scar. But because these participants believed that they had this ugly thing on their face, not that the scar is ugly, but you know what I'm saying? Because they believed that, guess what? Their experience then proved that because of their scar, they were treated differently. So if you're walking around, because of this, I'm less fortunate. Because of this, it's harder for me to do this. Because of this, I'm not as productive. Because of this, I can't get this thing in my life. That is what you will get. You will feel as though things are harder for yourself. So the extreme ownership part of that is owning your mindset, like owning your reality, owning any victimhood right now that you're potentially playing into. Like I will catch any stories that come up in my head of, oh, because of this, it could be harder to do this. I'm like, no, it's not. What the fuck? Nope, absolutely not. And it could be the smallest thing, like, oh, because I'm pregnant, it's harder for me to do blah, blah, blah. Nope, not necessarily. Right. But that is only up to you, not up to anybody else. It is only up to you. All right. The next thing that successful people have in common is self-discipline. You guys know I love talking about self-discipline, and I love talking about self-discipline. And like, I'm going to loop in here self-commitment as well, because often we can focus, or people in personal development can focus on this idea of like self-love. And it's like, it just sounds so aloof. I'm like, what is self-love? Like, I just think of self-love like a bath, but that's not necessarily self-love, because self-love is also self-discipline. It's self-commitment, right? And so when you really want something badly enough, whether it's going to your kid's soccer practice, whether it's prioritizing date night, whether it's a certain amount of money that you want to make in your business, if you want something badly enough, you've got to have a level of self-discipline and self-commitment. So you actually hold yourself accountable for what you want and go after it and make it happen. The self-discipline is then about, do you follow through with saying what you want to do? One of the easiest ways to feel confident, is to follow through with what you say you're going to do. So what is something that maybe even today you've said you're going to do, or this week you said you're going to do? Have you done it? It doesn't mean go burn yourself out trying to get a to-do list done with 300 things on it in a week. Like that's just unachievable. Because part of self-discipline and self-commitment is also, am I actually being reasonable with what I'm expecting myself to get done? Or am I putting so much on my to-do list that I'm actually setting myself up for failure? So we have to be aware of that too. But the self-discipline and self-confidence and self-commitment, like it's all wrapped in one. The more that you show up with discipline and have this self-commitment, like this energy of self-commitment, like I'm actually committed to becoming the version of myself that I want to be, that is what breeds self-confidence. So when you think about the woman or the man that you want to be next year, are you actually committed to doing what is required to become that person? Or are you going to continue to do what you've done this year and hope to get different results? Because you won't. If you want to continue to uplevel, expand, and literally quantum leap and condense time, then don't just do what you did this year. Do what you did this year plus more. Do something that your future self would do, not your current self. Have that self-discipline and self-commitment of doing the thing that potentially scares you, because inside of what scares you is your quantum leap. So self-discipline, and it doesn't mean burning yourself out. Like there is a way of being in feminine leadership and having self-discipline at the same time. We go deep into this inside of her. We'll be going in deep into it next year inside of her year. And once you join her year, you get 4 modules from my program, Her. And so you'll be able to already start implementing self-discipline from those modules anyway, before we even start the live program, or not even program, experience next year. And so this perfectly leads into the next one. I need to have some water, which is always learning, feeling like the student. Like I always consider myself a student. One thing that I absolutely love about my team, and that it's really important for me to have on my team in terms of like my leadership style, is pushback. I really love when my team is like, I think it's a terrible idea, or they tell me why, or they teach me something, or they explain their way of thinking. I love reading new books, watching a documentary, listening to a podcast about something where I'm like, I'm not really interested in this. Listen to it. Like I love learning. Even during the election, I'm not really that involved in it because I can't vote, but I live in the country, so I kind of care. The reason why I can't vote, for anyone that doesn't know this, by the way, is because I'm not an American citizen. You have to be an American citizen in order to vote. And I don't think I'm going to become an American citizen because I just don't really have any interest. Anyway, my point is I'm already a citizen of Australia and the UK. I don't really need another country. Not yet anyway. But I love learning about it. It's interesting, it's infuriating, but it's interesting to learn about different things. It's this sense of like curiosity, right? If you are so pigeonholed, you're limiting yourself. Don't pigeonhole yourself in any area of life because you are literally limiting your growth, your expansion, your potential, your possibilities. So, successful people, they are constantly seeking new knowledge, new skills, a better way of doing things. Like, classic example right now is AI. Like, we're all trying to learn AI because we do not want to be behind the curve. We do not want to fall through the cracks. We want to stay ahead of the curve. If you have that mindset of ahead of the curve, let me learn, let me improve my skill set. That also requires you putting your ego down, right? Because it requires you to be confused, to make mistakes, to ask questions. And that can be hard for people because they want to feel like they know everything all the time, but you don't know everything. And you're not meant to know everything. But if you have this complex of like, I know everything, you are limiting yourself. You are limiting yourself. You are limiting your creativity. You're limiting the spaciousness for your team to respond back to you. You're limiting the ways that you can expand as a human being, learning from your children, learning from your partner, just being challenged. Being challenged is a really good thing. It opens our mind up and it makes us better, not just business people, but also just better humans. So, opening your mind up to new ideas, new perspectives, it's allowing you to just become a person that other people feel like I can have a conversation with her or him because they're curious, they're open minded, they want to learn. They're not just this kind of like black and white thinker, their way is the only way, and they don't want to have a conversation about anything. I love people that just genuinely want to learn, and you can feel that from them. So, how could you in the next few weeks before we finish off the year? So you finish this year as you want to step into next year. How can you be opening yourself up to greater curiosity and learning? And that simply could just be listening to a podcast about a topic that you're like, this doesn't relate to me. Listen to it anyway, because you'd be surprised the little things that you can pick up or the moments of inspiration that may not fully relate to you when you think about it from like, a context point of view. But when you're listening to it and you're in the energy of it, it's like other things come through. And really quick side note, actually, on that note of like being in the energy of it for things to come through. Sometimes we have to be in the energy of something in order to get the action steps for the next thing that we have to do. So sometimes if we're trying to grow and expand, it's like we could fall into this mode of I just need someone to give me a list of things to do or a strategy to do or like the 5 steps to becoming blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to follow that and then I'll get there. And that might work for some of you. But there can also be moments where we're like, we don't even know the action steps to take, or like, that's just not going to fucking work for all of us. But what happens is when we put ourselves in the energy that we want to be in, when we put ourselves in the room of the people that expand us, what happens is we get so inspired that the action steps come through for us. So for some of you, you might be thinking like, I know how to create my dream life. I know how to manifest. I'm not sure if her year is for me. And maybe it's not for you, but maybe if you're feeling like you're hitting a glass ceiling or you're just stuck or you're just like, I just want more, but like, do I need all of these masterclasses? Like, is this really going to expand me? Maybe some of the stuff in the masterclasses, especially if you've been around the block with me for a few years, may not be like, oh my God, super revolutionary. But what if being in the energy of this program, what if being in the energy of these masterclasses, coming to these two, live events with me, what if the energy of it, what if that poured through all of your action steps that then got you your dream life? Because for me, I know I've talked about this before. I've been going to more events recently, and by being in these rooms, by being in this energy, literally just by even being with team members in real life rather than on a computer, it brings in all of these ideas and it brings in these action steps that I truly am like, I would never thought of these action steps had I not been in this energy. So sometimes what we need for like to find the action steps is not to be handed this black and white step-by-step thing that worked for somebody else, but we need to step into the the energy, a place that inspires us, or we need to step into the energy of the person that we want to be. And then the action steps come through because of how inspired we're feeling. We all know that when we feel inspired, new ideas pop in that we never would have thought of before. So think about being in that for 12 months. I was about to say 12 years, maybe, but 12 months. Like that is then what you could potentially be getting out of her year, plus obviously so much more that you won't even know you're going to get out of it until you're actually inside of it. Friends, I am so excited to share with you that I have another one of my juicy, like wet knickers, panty dropping masterclasses. You guys, if you haven't been to one of my masterclasses before, you can actually head to the masterclass vault and you can watch one of the previous ones. The title of it is Becoming Her in 2025. And we're going to be going into the 7 pillars that are essential for you to become her in 2025 and to create the life of your dreams. So what we are going to be covering in the masterclass is what it means to actually quote unquote become her, how feminine leadership is paramount for easy manifestation, the 7 pillars, like I said before. We're going to be doing a little life audit so that you can figure out where you're holding yourself back and not take that. I'm going to break down what embodied manifestation is and how it will drastically change the way that you magnetize your dream life. We're going to have a live Q&A, and there's going to be so much more. And it is all happening very shortly. So if you don't have your name down on the list, you absolutely need to, so you do not miss out. This will be a limited time masterclass. And I am fucking jazzed about it because I mean, shit's just getting better and fucking better. So anyway, let's jump back into the episode. I will see you guys in this masterclass. So that's always learning. And then the next one on that note is growth through feedback. If you are somebody that is extremely defensive or lets their insecurities inhibit them from getting feedback, you are not going to grow. You are not going to grow. You will not grow at companies. You will not grow as an entrepreneur. You will not grow as a person. You will not feel like you're growing. And the reason being is that you're seeing like feedback as some kind of negative thing rather than, oh, wow, my feedback, the constructive criticism that I get from people, whether it's a friend, whether it's a lover, whether it's your kid, whether it's your boss, you know, you've got the potential of seeing that as a path for you to improve, as a path for you to change your strategies, you know, change your performance, change the way that you speak. You know, you see it as learning, as education, as codes for yourself, rather than taking it personally and seeing it as an attack. When someone gives you that feedback, that is codes for you becoming the best version of you, rather than some personal attack and like you're a shit human. So if you haven't gotten any constructive criticism recently, why don't you ask a team member? Why don't you ask your partner or your kid? Like, can you give me some constructive criticism of how I could be a better lover, a better employee, a better boss, a better coworker, and see what they say? And actually now I want my team, when you listen to this, I want to ask you, how can I be a better boss? It's these sorts of conversations that then not only allows you to grow as a person, but the relationship with the other person to then also grow and evolve. And that creates success at home, success in love, success in sex, success in business, success in your career, friendships, health, all of the things. And then the next one that I want to give you guys is, which I think is really, really, really important, especially these days. We can get super into scarcity right now with the holidays and everything, and just like the state of the world. Really important. Don't dwell on that, right? Like, do not dwell on that. If you constantly are dwelling on the state of the world, do you know how many years I've heard the state of the world? Like, as a business owner, like people either using it as a marketing concept because like it needs to be used to remind people, or whether it's like people using it as a reason why they, you know, quote unquote, can't join a program, or why they shouldn't join a program because like, oh my God, I feel guilty, like the state of the world. How could I be expanding myself? There is always going to be a problem with the state of the world. Like, if we just reflect back on the last 4 years, like, have we ever actually been like, oh, wow, the world is doing so good right now? Nope. There's always something bad happening in the world. And there will always be that, not because we live in this like horrible world, but because we live in a world of duality. There is always light and dark. There's always good and bad. There's always right and wrong. There's always happiness and sadness. And if you limit your growth because of the state of the world, I mean, you're never going to grow because there's always going to be some negative thing happening in the world versus realizing the state of the world, like the world needs your growth, needs your light, needs your success, needs your evolution, needs your love so much. Like when shit is happening around you, that is the ultimate time. Does it make sense to? That is the ultimate time to invest and expand. Because like I keep saying, the best, most magical, expansive manifestations will come in for you when it makes the least sense, when it's the worst time, etc. It's very often that people will be very logical about, making this decision where they want that decision to quantum leap them. But I'm like, if you're logical about this, you can't be logical about a quantum leap. You can't be logical about calling in this crazy manifestation. Like I'm telling you right now, that shit is happening for you at the worst time, right? Or it's happening for you at a time that you least expect it. Trust me, I know. Or it's happening at the best time, but there's still unideal moments throughout it. Like there's no moment of perfection. You cannot plan your manifestations to happen at the quote unquote perfect time because like there's time's always changing, right? It could have been perfect yesterday, but shit today. And so what I'm saying in all of this is just make sure that you're not stalling yourself because you're waiting for the world to be good, because you'll be waiting for a very, very long time. And really, if you're honest with yourself, it's just an excuse. It's just an excuse because you're afraid of going to the next level. You're afraid of investing in yourself. You're afraid of failing. You're afraid of it not working. You're afraid of not showing up. You're afraid of self-sabotaging. You're just afraid, right? But you will never quantum leap without having a bit of that fear as you move through it. All my quantum leaps, they haven't been like, oh my God, this feels so good. This is so easy. Like, wow, 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 like unicorns and rainbows. And then like, boom, the quantum leap is here. Absolutely not. The quantum leaps happen with like rough moments. They happen with fear. They happen with anxiety. They happen with second guessing. That is all part of it. So instead of making that some abnormal thing where you have to get rid of those fears, actually realize that those fears are a sign that this thing, this choice, this move, this like next step, whatever it is, that it is actually going to quantum leap you. Like that is part of the kind of proof, if you will, that this is going to quantum leap you, because our quantum leaps are in the things that we are afraid of. They're not in the things that we're like, oh, easy. No, that's called comfort zone. And so my last little one that I'm going to give you of what most successful people all have in common is, oh wait, I didn't even give you guys this one. It was belief in abundance. Like having this mind, I gave it to you without actually being clear about it. So successful people always believe there is enough to go around. There is enough resources. There is enough opportunities. There is enough success for everyone. We aren't sitting in like this place of scarcity. We aren't thinking fear and competition and hatred. It's this energy of collaboration, of lifting others up, of knowing that your success, my success, doesn't take away from somebody else's. My light shining or your light shining doesn't dim somebody else's light. We can all have our light shining at the same time because there are infinite resources. What I like to remind people of is, I think from an energetic standpoint, when everybody else is contracting, you're expanding. When everybody else is in fear and scarcity, you're in abundance, because it's like easier to tap into it in the sense of there are like less people tapping into that energy of abundance, right? So it's like, well, more for me then. It actually can almost like, it's more of like a logical thing that's helpful of if there was a finite amount, if less people are tapping into abundance because everyone's like scared, 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 great, more for you. And why that's important to remember, like from a logical kind of standpoint and an energetic standpoint, is to make sure that you don't trip into, when everybody else is going into scarcity, you go into scarcity too. When everybody else is going into scarcity, you go deep into abundance. That doesn't mean when everyone else is into abundance, you go scarcity, but hopefully you get what I'm putting down. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down. The last one that I'll leave with is, and then I've got a little wrap up for you guys on just like a really important action step that I cannot recommend enough. Generosity. Like just being generous in sharing their knowledge, generous in resources, generous in connections. It's just that energy of like giving, of abundance, of like, there is enough to go around. I don't need to like hog everything to myself or keep everything a secret to myself, if you will. And on that note, this is also where credit comes in. I need to do an episode on this in regards to like people copying me and how I deal with that, because I get asked that quite a bit from other business owners. So I thought that could be helpful of like how I deal with that. But, if you're inspired, don't copy. If you're inspired by somebody else, or if you've done a program of mine or of somebody else's, and then you want to like talk about a concept that you learned in that on an Instagram post, give credit. Not only because you've probably signed a contract that has an intellectual property clause like mine does. So not only do you actually 100% need to be doing it, otherwise they could definitely get you in trouble, but you also should be doing it from an energetic, like ethical standpoint of if you've learnt this from somebody else, be generous, be abundant in not saying that's come from you. Share where this concept has come from rather than thinking I have to just like hog it for myself, because that energy isn't the energy of successful people. Like successful people are sharing, they're collaborating, they're having that energy of generosity. So, last thing, how do you up level right now? And I've kind of alluded to this. Put yourself in situations where the stakes are high. So, when I say put yourself in situations when the stakes are high, I'm talking about like put yourself in a situation where a fire is lit under your ass. So, one of the first things that I did that did this and like blasted me off was the first mastermind I ever joined, like the first business coach I hired, I gave her all of my savings. I had $10,000 in the bank. I remember the exact clothes that I was wearing. I gave her $10,000, all my money in my bank account, and it changed my life. Not because like she did anything magical. She actually ended up being kind of shit and like didn't show up for calls. Very weird, but learned what not to do. But it was how I then showed up for me. It was what I then did. It was how I changed, how I believed in myself, and the fire that was lit under my ass of like, right. I was like, well, I'm going to New York in 2 weeks, so I need to make this fucking money back because I need money in New York. And it put me in this like big boost of energy, of electricity, of like the way that I valued myself, the way that I showed up for myself. So put yourself in situations where the stakes are high. So for you, that could be joining her year. It could be joining Queen Alchemy. It could be doing something else. It could be moving homes. It could be buying your first house. Like sometimes we need to put ourselves in a situation or create a situation where we're like, fuck. And we go a little bit into that, like, almost like fight or flight, because that's where a bit of magic happens. We don't get outside of our comfort zone by just playing it safe. Right. So another way that I did this when I was first starting out was I purposely left home because I knew that if I kept staying at home, I wouldn't actually do what was required to get my business off the ground because I had food on the table every night. I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to pay water, gas, electricity. I didn't have to buy my own food. And I actually needed that shit. I needed that fear of like, oh my God, am I going to be able to afford my food this week? Am I going to be able to afford to like pay for X, Y, and Z? I needed that so that I fully showed up, because a lot of the times we think to ourselves we're showing up, but we're not. We're really not. We could go further. We could show up with more gumption, with more fire. We really could be more relentless with ourselves. And so her year, yes, it definitely is a stretch for some people financially, but it's also fucking doable. Like it is doable if you really want your dream life badly enough. If you were to get creative. And when I say get creative, like, do you know that you can make like $1,000 a month doing surveys online? Probably not. Get creative. How can you make extra money on the side if you need to? Because I'm telling you right now, the people that do that, that are like, I can't afford this, but I'm fucking doing it anyway. Like those people, oh my God, do they quantum leap, because they have done something that is so challenging for them. That's partly why I'm excited to become a mom, not just because I'm excited to become a mom, but I'm like, this is going to be a fucking challenge. And I know that this is going to expand me as a person, as a business owner. It's going to expand my company. It's going to expand everything to new heights because I am going to be challenged so much. And I haven't been challenged in this way. Well, I've also expanded my nervous system capacity. I guess my book's been like really fucking challenging. But, now that I have this man that just like brings so much safety into my life, I'm not challenged in the ways that I used to be in regards to like travel stress and like, dealing with like having to pay bills. Like I don't have to even deal with any of that shit anymore. Right. And we all know that like doing all of that stuff as well, like that invokes more of this kind of fire under our ass. And I'm not doing it anymore. So I've realized I've had to find other ways of really invoking, like, let's fucking make shit happen. So between now and the end of the year, put yourself in situations that are literally going to force you to quantum leap. Do not play it safe. Don't play it safe. So even though for some of you, her year might feel like a crazy investment, it might feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? That is the reason why you need to join. We are 12 months together. We're not 12 days. We're not 12 seconds. We are 12 months together. Like, do you know what is possible for you? Like, you are going to be unrecognizable by this time next year. Unrecognizable. And we have 2 in-person days. Like, oh my God, I'm just so excited. One of those in-person days, they're going to be at my house here. So you really can just feel like, all right, if she can have this, I can have this. Because I'm no different from you. You might be a brunette, I might be a blonde. But the only difference between you and I is truly how I've shown up and are you showing up with that much gumption and relentlessness and power and confidence. And I can do this attitude. Are you showing up with that way, with that kind of energy? So I know many of you probably as business owners or non-business owners have heard about masterminds. Most masterminds are made for business owners, and most masterminds, the fees range from $10,000 to $50,000 a year and plus. And most of them are business owners, but I realize there's a massive gap in the market. And that's actually why I created her to begin with. Because feminine leadership is not just for business women. It's not just for us entrepreneurs. It's also for those of you that work for somebody else or that don't, that are mothers, right? You're still leading in some way, shape, or form. We still want that energy of a mastermind. We want to be inspired. We want to have community. We want to grow and evolve. Like masterminds are so powerful from an energy, from a community, from a learning, from an expansion standpoint. They're so powerful, right? They expand you. But I didn't want the mastermind to have to be really high ticket. It will be next year. I will tell you guys this. This is the first and only year that her year will be this price tag. It will then be at least $8,000 next year. And because I will have a toddler, I will not probably be as live with you. So if you are even on the fence, get the fuck off because you will regret it because you will not get the same amount of me at this price tag the year after. I'm telling you that right now. So I wanted to create a mastermind like experience, but not have it be so exclusive or with such a high price tag. So if you haven't already joined and you would like to, please, please, please join us. I'm here to answer any and all questions. You get the New Year's Eve bundle included if you join before December 13th and the early bird pricing as well. And seriously, the value that you get for this price tag is wild. I'm like, will I regret this? I hope not. So please, please, please join. If you have any questions, send them through to me and I will see you guys in the next episode.